Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this video is about my accidental encounter with Joe Kittinger. Now, anybody who knows much about aviation history knows who Joe Kittinger is, but a lot of these really famous people and legends, if you don't know what they look like necessarily, right now, you may come across them and not realizing who you're talking to. I have had a very blessed and privileged career of working with some of the legends of aviation, working with them in a technical and operational basis, such as General Yeager, Bob Hoover, Bob Gilliland, Dick Scobie, and just a lot of people like that are just extremely interesting people to work with. But sometimes these people can kind of sneak up on you before you know what's going on, and that was the case with Joe Kittinger. Now, I had been furloughed from United Airlines. I was hired by Cessna in flight test. I was the only one in flight test who not only had a military aviation background, but had experience as a T-37 instructor. And Cessna had decided when the Air Force says, hey, we want a proposal for a follow-on trainer of the T-37, Cessna kind of said, we're busy doing commercial aircraft. We don't care about that. No. We'll let that go. Well, Fairchild got involved, and they got a head start, and they were the only ones. And finally, the upper management decided, we're going to submit a proposal. We're going to do that. So, okay, we are behind the power curve. We are late. Fairchild even had a subscale flying prototype that they were getting flight test data on, and Cessna never got past an artist's rendition. Not even a mock-up. Okay, nothing. So we're behind the power curve, and they said, we want you to head the cockpit and escape system team. And I go, okay, I'll head the team. I guess I've got the experience. Well, the team ended up being me and one consultant. So it was a lot of work. And at the time, I was new at Cessna. I had never done a proposal like this before. So I had to hit the ground running. I'm behind already, and I haven't even started. And they're going to help me out with a consultant. Okay, that's great. And I was also dealing with some medical issues at the time that were pretty involved and were taking a lot of my attention. So it was not a good time in my career as it was. And they said, hey, we got this consultant to help you out with a lot of the anthropomorphic things because you have to have 95th percentile seating and stuff like this. And I learned a lot about my body type, why my head tended to hit the canopy, because although I'm 6 foot, I'm at 90, which isn't terribly high percentile wise, but I'm at the 95th percentile for seating height. Okay, so they send this consultant over. Okay, this guy shows up. Now, he was younger than this. I don't have a picture of him in the actual time frame, and he didn't come with all these posters because that would have been a dead giveaway, okay? And he just says, hi, my name's Joe, and I'm here to help you, and I've got all these books about, percentile reach and stuff like that. So, okay, great, Joe, let's get started. Let's do this. So we're setting up the cockpit design here, and this is what the proposal looks like. And of course, this is so long ago. This is in the early 80s that this was going on this proposal, and we did not have CRTs wouldn't fit in the space provided if we even wanted to do that, and LCDs weren't really up to speed at the time. So the cockpit's all round dials and stuff like that. And we're doing, okay, here's the ejection seat. That was part of the whole thing too. And you had to build it, and instrument panel was such that when you ejected, you didn't take your knees off, stuff like that. We had various reach functions. And I would have, we had all the sequencing for the ejection seat system. And, this is all involved. And I met with ejection seat contractors and, had meetings with them and that. And we had the proposal for the seat and stuff like that. And there was various functionalities that we explained in the procedure here. And of course, in the meantime, Fairchild had their subscale flying prototype that they were getting all sorts of flight test data on, and in the end, they ended up getting the contract, but they screwed it up. That's why this is what their current aircraft looks like on the flight line, although this isn't a flight line you really want to be at. But now let's go back to meeting Joe here. Now, like I said, a lot was going on. I felt a lot of pressure behind the power curve. I had the head guy was a micromanager. We had to put all these proposals up on the wall. The wall was full with all these typed up proposals, and he would go up there and he would wordsmith it, and he changed a word, and so I changed the word, and then a little bit later come back, and he's up there, and I see him looking at it, and he changes the word again, and he says, I like this wording better, and I go, well, that's very interesting. That was my original wording before you changed it. I'm not sure if that made a good impression on him or not, but I had dealt with micromanagers before in the Air Force, so this was nothing new. But okay, Joe and we're having a good time kind of talking. We're starting to get to know each other. And Joe says that he was an Air Force pilot. And I go, oh, cool. I was an Air Force pilot, too. That's very interesting. And he said, yeah, and he did some parachute jumping. And I said, oh, I did some parachute jumping, too. I was president of the Iowa parachute team. And I said, I made a nice high-altitude jump from almost 18,000 feet. And, of course, this is where you should really always know who the heck you're talking to before you start flapping your gums. And Joe says, oh, that's interesting. I made a pretty high altitude parachute jump also. And I said, oh, cool. How high did you go out? And he goes, it was just over 100,000 feet. And I said, what? 100? What? Wait, what's your last name? And then it finally, Joe Kittinger. And then it finally goes, oh my gosh. I am sitting next to a legend here and didn't even realize it. And that's when it got to be really interesting and the stories started to flow. Now, Joe had kind of an interesting career. He ended up as a colonel in the Air Force, but he held the record for the highest skydive at 102,800 feet, and that held 1960 till 2012 when Baumgartner eclipsed the record. Now, he also had quite an interesting career. Let me tell you first about how he got involved in this whole thing. He went through Air Force pilot training and was assigned to an F-84 squadron in Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. But he comes back. He was then later transferred to Holloman Air Force Base, and at the time they were doing the rocket sled testing, and he was assigned to be a chase pilot. And John Stapp was the medical officer who was doing a lot of these runs, and we had medical officers out at Edwards who did amazing things. They flew around with the canopy off in the back seat of an F-15 to see the physiological effects and stuff like that. These guys were cool guys, and a lot of them were pilots too. Just really neat people. But Joe Kittinger became very impressed with John Strapp. John Strapp became very impressed with Joe Kittinger, and he got him started involved in 1957 in the Project Manhigh, and that's when they started doing the parachute jumps. Now, the very first parachute jump was quite interesting. That was only 76,400 feet, and it was in November 16th, 1959, and he had an equipment malfunction, got into a spin of 120, a flat spin of 120 revolutions. Now, okay, I had a little bit of experiences. I had trouble in free fall with spinning. I'm not the most, athletic and all this stuff, and I didn't have my body position. I'd start rotating, and I would get going pretty fast, and when I pulled, I would actually wrap the lines halfway up. Well, he got extreme G forces and up to 22 Gs. I know I never got anything like that. And he could have very easily died in this thing. But the automatic opening equipment operated, and he was able to survive. And on a second jump, December 11th, in Excelsior 2 in 1959, he jumped again from 74,700 feet, and he was awarded the Leo Stevens Parachute Medal for this. And he later had other adventures, Excelsior 3, where he made the final high-altitude jump, and this was the record-setting one that held 102,800 feet, and he had a small drogue parachute for stability. Now, the other interesting thing was after he got done doing all of this, he goes back into the Air Force, and well, I'll tell you about that in just a second. Here's another picture, of course, in the museum of the Excelsior setup. Now, of course, Joe mentioned when you're up at these high altitudes, 102,000 feet and stuff like that, you have no perception virtually of how high you are in the speeds and stuff. And actually, I'm a lifetime member of EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association. We had Baumgartner come and talk, and they had it instrumented, of course, and he went supersonic for a brief period there. And it was just amazing to watch the velocity parameters, although he wasn't able to really experience much of the speed effect, just seeing the numbers and stuff. Of course, when you're at high altitude, the speed of sound has a very low indicated pressure quantity to it, so you get going very fast quickly without really picking up much of an air blast that you would, of course, at lower altitude. And in the whole discussion about these things, some of Joe's stories were quite interesting. He talked about, well, they're going to do these balloon flights, and they thought, well, we'd better get a balloon license. So he went and he called up the FAA, and they thought he was kidding. They thought he was joking about a balloon license, and he explained, no, they wanted to go up in the stratosphere. Now they really thought he was joking, okay? So he had a hard time convincing him that, they really were going to do this, and they wanted the proper license and stuff like that. And of course, the FAA isn't always the easiest to work with and stuff like that. But his Air Force career was quite interesting, too. He had 3 tours over in Vietnam, a total of 483 combat missions, and his first 2 tours were in an A-26 Invader, and it was used for operations over there in Vietnam. And he volunteered for a 3rd tour, and this time he was checked out in the F-4 Phantom II. And that tour of duty was in 71, 72 while I was in college there. And he commanded the 555th Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Triple Nickel Squadron. And during that period, he shot down a MiG-21, but unfortunately also got shot down by a MiG-21. And he spent some time in the Hanoi Hilton there, both he and his backseater, before they were freed. Now, here for me is kind of the sad part. The Experimental Aircraft Association used to have a thing for the lifetime members until they got too many lifetime members, I think, where they would have a dinner, open bar, which is nice, and a presentation by somebody of aviation note. And Joe Kittinger came, and of course, a lot of these guys, and I've bought in a number of the books, but he came and gave the presentation, and after it was over, he was doing a book signing, and there was a crowd, believe me, trying to get his book. And I'm sitting there kind of in the back, and I haven't gone up, made any attempt to talk to Joe because he's crowded by a lot of people around him. And then he ran out of books, and I thought, well, it's late. There's still a lot of people want to talk to him. I'll pass on it. And I now do have the book, but and it's not directly autographed to me because I never got it. And Joe passed away. I kind of regret that I didn't get a chance to go back up and say, hi, Joe, it was great working with you. We had a fun time. Gosh, I enjoyed your stories. But this is the story of a guy who sits down next to you to help you out, and you start chatting, and you're busy, and you don't really have time to get in the background, and he looks just like anybody else. But when the stories start coming out, you go, no, he isn't like just anybody else. And it's amazing the everyday people you can take for granted, and you don't realize the absolutely amazing background that they have. So that's my story about meeting and working with Joe Kittinger. And of course, you can read his book with a lot more detail. And it was quite an adventure and very personally rewarding and heartwarming for me to have a chance for several months, even though the Cessna didn't get their proposals through, but having that time to work with Joe. And now the thing I regret that we didn't spend a little more time together, but there was just a lot going on, and it was unfortunate. And if I had to do it over again, I would have taken more time to have fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story.